My name is Javi Romo. I'm from Valley West, Area Director, and I will be the moderator for a panel discussion on California Alliance for Community Schools. Just a couple things before we start up. The California Alliance for Community Schools. It's a coalition of California parents, community, educators, and students united in our commitment to transforming public education in ways that contribute to a more just, equitable, and participatory society. What is bargaining for the common good? I'm sure you've heard that term quite a few times during the Weekend Leadership Conference. It's an organizing approach where public sector unions use contract fights to organize local stakeholders around a set of demands that benefit not just the bargaining units, but also student achievement and the wider community. We've got 8 local unions who are participating in the bargaining for the common good. That is Oakland, San Francisco, Richmond, San Bernardino, San Jose, Anaheim, San Diego, and UTLA. In terms of the platform for the schools all our students deserve, low class sizes, additional resources for our schools, shared decision-making at our local schools, charter schools accountable to our communities, and safe and supportive school environments. Let me introduce our distinguished panel. Let's see. We have Lita Blanc, who is the president of United Educators of San Francisco. We have Demetrio Gonzalez, president, United Teachers of Richmond. Then we have our own Cecily Myard Cruz, UTLA. All right. All right, so we're going to have a discussion, time permitting, on 4 questions. I will ask the questions and give an opportunity for our panelists to answer them. California is 46th out of 50th in per pupil funding. How do you see this reflected in your district?
So in San Francisco, we have a situation which I'm sure can't hear. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So in San Francisco, our situation is very similar to that here in LA. Inadequate funding means that in general, our students do not have the rich, well-rounded curriculum they deserve. In elementary schools, art, music, PE are doled out. Not every grade level has it every week, the way it was when I grew up. You have music on Mondays, PE on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like that. So we are desperately understaffed with support for our classrooms. We would like to see a paraprofessional in every classroom. We would like to see full-time social workers at every elementary school with an adequate ratio for other support providers. And we do have a tiering system where the schools that are identified as highest needs get some more resources, but that tiering system means that basically many students and many schools do not have the resources they need. And the tiering system changes from year to year based on a kind of archaic formula that's impossible to understand. And very, very important to all of us is that the inadequate funding of the public schools in California means that in San Francisco, which is the most expensive city in the country, there is a turnover which has created a real crisis for public education. And as long as we cannot pay our educators what they need to live comfortably in the city where they teach, we're going to continue to have a turnover. So those are some of the main factors that we see.
First of all, good morning. My name is Demetrio, and I'm the president of Richmond. I am not a student. Yesterday, someone stopped me in an elevator, and they're like, "Oh, are you looking for the student group?" I was like, "No, but thank you. I appreciate that." This question hits very close to my heart. Right now, we're in negotiations for compensation. And as you guys know, the struggle is incredibly real. Funding is crucial in places like LA, San Francisco, Richmond, where we can't afford to live where we work. And Richmond is experiencing the same thing that Lita talked about, which is that our members have to commute up to 2 hours from Sacramento, from San Jose, in order to come and work in Richmond. And our students are suffering because of it. We lose about 20% of our membership every year because people cannot afford to live where we work and where we love to be. So that's just one small part, but let's talk about how there's not enough supplies in our schools. We're a very low income community, and how many of you have experienced that your principal gives you 24 pencils every 2 months for your kindergarten class, right? And I don't know how they expect that to survive when they last 2 days, right? And teachers and educators should not have to survive in 24 pencils every 2 months, which, as we know, we end up buying our own supplies, which is ridiculous. And then when we're at the negotiating table, we have to talk about what are our priorities. If your priority is a 4% raise, then you're not going to get professional development. That's crazy to me, right? In what profession do we have to choose between one thing or another? We need to fund our schools differently, which is one of the things that truly excites me about this group, that we're truly going to fight for some things like what Alex mentioned in his State of the Union, which is the 24-20 campaign, which is going to truly change our educational system. And I haven't even talked about the students, right? My community, we lost 8 students last year due to violence. Usually when I tell people I'm from Richmond, they say 2 things. "Oh, Richmond, Virginia?" And I'm like, "No, Richmond, California." And then they switch their face and they're like, "Oh, you're from Richmond." Because our community has gone through a lot of violence. But our schools are not adequate enough to survive that. We don't have the right trauma supports, the right resources to support our students that we see come in every day with trauma and lack of resources. So this absolutely needs to change, and it's going to be our priority as an alliance to truly fund our schools.
Well, good morning, UTLA. All right. So, I don't have to tell any of you, when we say 46 out of 50, there's a problem. And I think we all know that there is a problem with funding. And I'm glad that Demetrio just brought up the 20 by 20 campaign. It's going to be a mantra that not only UTLA and all of our coalition has to put out there, we have to get with our legislators to start shaking the actual tree, because we know that the money is there. When we look in our classrooms, you guys, LA classrooms, we know that we have been starved for resources. And the panelists here have said that. But when I look on Facebook and I see an Oklahoma teacher panhandling for school supplies, there's a problem, right? And in 5 hours, she made more money, and that's ridiculous. And so we know. Something I brought up in the core training yesterday with Valley East, I said, how many folks go to Target or Target and you put more items in your basket for your students than you do for your own household, right? And that's because we are missing this vital funding, right? Our school buildings are dilapidated. They're deplorable. And how do we expect our students to feel great about their school when the buildings are falling apart and the morale is low? So, I mean, there's something to be done, and this coalition, I really believe, can forge a new face in what we're facing.
Question 2. What has been valuable over the last year in working with the coalition of local unions?
Can you hear me now? I was told it was a little quiet. Is it okay? Yeah, okay.
Thumbs up.
Okay, so for me and for UESF, I think the most important attraction and strength of participating in this, we first started calling ourselves the statewide network, and then we scrambled for a name and came up with the California Alliance for Community Schools, is very much the support of hearing from brothers and sisters in 7 other teacher educator unions in challenging times, because we have the right wing who's very clear and very organized, and this is another tool for us, a way of collaborating and sharing not just ideas, but really helping each other take on a bold vision and have an aspirational perspective, so that when we're fighting our local fights, we're not just asking for what's possible, but we're actually putting out what's necessary for ourselves and our students. For me, one of the most important aspects of this collaboration has been actually sharing contract language that has been won in the past or that we're working on right now. I'm going to give you a few examples, because big ideas and slogans are great, but sometimes it comes down to what it is that you're able to get for yourselves as educators and for your students at the bargaining table. So, for example, San Diego had in their last contract a guaranteed funding requirement so that the most needy schools were getting a differential funding. And UESF, in this round of bargaining, has demanded that all Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools have a minimum funding for their RSP program, because as it is now, if your designation changes, regardless of your population staying the same, you lose your funding. And you can lose your special ed teacher in the middle of the year with that person going down to 0.5. The kids are there, but the staffing is not. So that's new, and the district said that's not bargainable, and we said we're still talking about it. So standardized testing has been sucking the lifeblood out of our classrooms and stealing precious quality teaching time for 15 years, I think. And UESF has been, we have a district union assessment committee, but when we coming together with brothers and sisters in this coalition, I was able to look at language from UTLA around testing, and I'm happy to say that our bargaining team put forward a proposal that said, in San Francisco, teachers shall not be required to give any assessments other than those mandated by the state and the federal government. The district has said nothing to us. We are waiting for a response, but we know this is something that many of our members, particularly elementary school teachers, feel really passionate about. Also, we have included language that would increase parent and community voice at sites and in the district, particularly through the inclusion support team, which deals with our special ed students, and the school health and safety committee. And last but not least, we have prioritized requesting or demanding PD on restorative practice, trauma-informed practice, and inclusive practice, not just occasionally, not just for some, but for all our members every year.
For me, I mean, Lita really talked about majority of the things I was going to talk about, is that sense of not being alone in the fight. And in our unions, we usually have so much work to do in our locals, right, in LA, in Richmond, San Francisco, that we don't usually go outside of that. And what this alliance has shown me is that we're not alone in the fight, right? We're all going through the same struggles, and we got to unite in order to win this bigger battle that we're going through, right? We got to win this battle against privatization. We got to win this battle in the state and nationally. We're constantly being attacked. And this has shown me that it's time that we broaden our scope and we work together in order to make those things happen. And the Alliance has created this pathway for us in Richmond to build even a bigger coalition with our own community organizations, our students, our parents. Because the Alliance is not just unions, right? It's parents, it's students, it's community leaders, it's friendly politicians to teachers. So we have been able to build a large coalition in the North that we hope to expand. And that has truly pushed an agenda to support what we're fighting for.
Well, I think it's very important to note about this specific alliance and coalition. UTLA, President Alex Caputo-Pearl, Lindsey Birmingham, who's the president of San Diego, and Trish Gorham, who's the president of Oakland, really started meeting at CTA State Council about almost 2 years ago. Just meeting, they didn't have a space, they were meeting off to the side, talking about privatization across the locals, but also talking about the charter encroachment in those three locals. And CTA, California Teachers Association, finally said, well, let's give them a room and a space. And then they started talking about what other locals were going through, and that's how this coalition really formed. So I think Demetrio and Lita brought up some great points, but I think it's about building power, right? So Demetrio said not feeling alone, right? We already know there are the same struggles, maybe to different magnitudes in the other locals, but coming together and building power, that's how we build strength up and down the state, right? And so a couple of other things that I wanted to say, it's also about organizing. It's UTLA finding out what San Francisco's doing, or San Diego, obviously Richmond, but it's also for those locals to learn about systems and organizing that we're doing in UTLA. So it has really been a sounding board to kind of really talk about all of the things that we're doing in UTLA and other locals, hearing and sharing best practices and ideas, and really coming up with strategies and tactics. So I really appreciate the work that has gone into making this coalition a reality.
Next steps.
Next steps. Okay. So what I want to say for the unions involved in this effort, the very next step is, well, on a statewide level, is that we have a commitment from the 8 regions that are represented in the alliance to continue the discussion with our community groups on a statewide level. So that's ongoing. We met 2 weeks ago in San Diego, and it was a very rich discussion, and there's a planning group which will be getting together sometime in the next month or so to see how we continue to coordinate. On a local level, UASF, our main alliance with community groups is called Close the Gap. And we have a few things that we're looking at for the fall. One is to put out a joint public statement from Close the Gap our newest superintendent about stopping the opportunity and the economic gaps that exist for our students in our schools. Also tracking together the increasing weight of charters in San Francisco, because it's kind of a dirty secret that most people don't know that if you ask the average member, they might think we have maybe 7 or 8 charter schools, but we actually have 14, and charter school attendance has grown to 10% of attendance in our district. So the absolute number has not increased tremendously, but there is a drain on our resources, and we want to research that and make it known. We're thinking possibly about seeing if we can bring forward a Board of Education proposed policy around a cap or moratorium on charter schools. That's something that was done by one of the locals here in close to LA, right?
Huntington Park.
Huntington Park, right. And we have the language, and we're just starting to think about how we can strategize around that. And we want to educate ourselves and our other community allies around community schools. We're hoping to have a public forum either at the end of August or sometime in September, because we want to expand the number of active parent groups who are coming to close the gap. And we're also looking at working with our community partners to get extra funding for our after-school and preschool programs, which have been affected already by the DeVos cuts. That's it. That's plenty.
As Alex mentioned in his speech on Friday, I think that for the Alliance, the next step is truly going to be organizing. We have not met since we met in San Diego, what Lita was referring to as our meeting with our community partners. But I know that we're going to have to plan many different pressure points that will lead to November 2018, right? Because the only way that we're actually going to achieve what Alex mentioned as the 20 by 20 campaign is that if we do it together all throughout the state and we continue organizing. I didn't mention this earlier, but something that's come out of this alliance is that we have been able to put pressure points last year. I mean, the May 12 event, it happened all throughout the state, and the unions in the alliance really pushed that work. We joined Oakland, San Francisco had some demonstrations. You guys did a lot of stuff here in LA. San Diego did as well. So we need to continue putting pressure to the state so that we can get that funding. And I think locally, it's going to continue working on negotiations. And as Cecily mentioned, we're all going through negotiations at the same time. So it's going to be sharing resources, learning from one another as we're going through this process. But as you know, the state has said we don't have money for education right now. So our locals are really taking that seriously, right? As you guys saw, some locals have already taken 1, even less % for increases right now, and we just can't allow that. And as Lita mentioned, the fight on charters is real. I mean, you guys are the hub of that fight. And I don't know if you guys saw the article in the Times that said that Richmond is the next LA and the next Oakland, and it's true. We have grown 100% in the last year on charter schools. And people are seeing us right now as the weakest link, so charters are coming in, and I kid you not, every board meeting we're speaking and spending 2-3 hours on a new charter every time. So that's really what we're concentrating on. Regionally, San Francisco, Oakland, and Richmond are going to hopefully meet with our community partners and decide next steps as well.
Well, I mean, I think talking about and really saying getting ready, right? Gervais said getting ready for the fight. And I think that is truly what's going to happen. We have a fight on our hands, and make no mistake about that, right? There are pressure points that we've all been pushing at, and bringing up the May 12th event, which were those legislative visits. We had pictures, and most of you were at them, different ones. It was great to see up and down the state of California, all of us working together. That's powerful. That's how you build a movement, when we're coming together and supporting each other's work. It's also the next steps in really engaging with the community in a real way within this alliance and building that capacity and organizing and pushing forward. That's what I see as the next steps for this alliance.
And our final question, what are the opportunities with the alliance? What are the obstacles in this alliance?
I'm going to start with the challenges. I won't say obstacle, because an obstacle seems like it seems more daunting to me than a challenge. A challenge we can rise to. An obstacle we might recede. So the same way as in our classrooms, every student has their own strengths and weaknesses. Every union and every community group or coalition has their own strengths and weaknesses. So I think one of our challenges as a group of educator unions coming together with our allies is recognizing that each union has its own profile, its own experiences, its own timelines, and we can't be mechanical about saying everyone on what date do you have, October 11th, we're all doing site picketing. It might happen. We're hoping to have some coordinated day in the next few months, but each local has its own contract fight, and we're not syncing up 100% at all, but it's finding where we can sync up and get strength from each other. Another challenge which we experienced actually 2 weeks ago in a very productive way is that those of us who've been meeting over the last year and a half have an idea of what those pressure points would be, or what the reasonable next steps would be. But our community partners, guess what they said to us? Are you asking us to sign on to a preconceived agenda, or are you asking us really what our priorities are? So that was really important, and that plays out, I think, locally too. Are we actually sitting with our community allies and having a discussion, or are we inviting them to sign on to our petition? So that's a challenge. But the biggest thing is that I think the opportunity is that there's great potential for an effective statewide structure that complements our local alliances and our local organizing efforts and fits in with the national coordination that we have through our unions, the NEA, and the AFT, and AROS, which is also a tremendous national structure. This gives us a chance on the statewide level to build our strength together.
I like the way that Lita put it as the challenges. I see a couple challenges. One is the political machine, right? You all experienced it firsthand in your school board elections. And part of that is going to be money. And people are going to organize against this idea that we have. And in Richmond, locally, we're going through the same fights. Our last school board election, we're a lot smaller. Close to $1 million was put into our school board election. And we were able to defeat that. But that doesn't mean that they're going to give up. And they're just starting, right? I mean, you guys saw that. So I see that as a big challenge, but also an opportunity to truly organize and bring our members out. And not just our members, but our community, because people saw that. People woke up at your school board elections the next day, right? And people woke up the day after November 8th, on that day actually, even if some of us didn't want to, right? And those are huge opportunities for us to move this agenda of truly funding our education appropriately. And another piece is geography, right? Richmond's really far from LA, right? Doesn't seem like it, but it is. So the opportunity of us working together becomes also a struggle, right? Because sometimes the only thing we can do is share resources, but what we have talked about is about being there for each other through contract negotiations. So how can Richmond come to LA and come to a board meeting and speak on your behalf? How can we go to San Francisco? How can we be at Oakland and San Jose, right? That geography piece is real, but I think that it also brings a good opportunity for us to truly see partnership, and I'm really excited to see what that develops into.
All right. Well, I think it's a great thing that Lita just brought up, to look at it as a challenge, something that we rise to, right? And it's hard trying to coordinate with 8 locals, especially given the daunting task that we all have. It's very daunting. We're pulled in many different directions. Some folks are in contract negotiations, others are not. We're trying to share resources. We're trying to look at school board resolutions and put those across. Those are some of those challenges. And geography. Demetrio said it best. We're in different places. And so those are challenges, but the opportunities are so great, especially around our charter legislation. We had several of our authors of our bills here last night at the PACE reception. Those are things that we all in the coalition ascribe to, right? Looking at charter transparency and accountability, those are those pieces. Building off of the work from the San Diego conference with the community groups, those are opportunities to bring more of the community in, and not just as a signer, but actually on the ground floor, building with us, so that we are not alone and we can go out. If we have to go out on strike, that we know that the community supports the work that we're doing. And if we are on strike in LA, I know that the brothers and sisters in this coalition will be posting on social media if they can't get down here and really supporting our work. But it's also looking at that revenue piece. Each one of our locals can push on that revenue piece and really start changing the game with our politicians to say, we need to raise the per pupil funding. We have to do that. And those are some of the opportunities. Building power, and I'm gonna end with that. Building power and building strength is monumental in an alliance of big locals up and down the state.
In closing, 2 weeks ago I had an opportunity to go down to San Diego with some really terrific teammates that are part of the team going down there. I'd like to leave you with a few statements that I kind of took away from that weekend. Our enemies are out there to destroy us. They really are. We are only strong if we stand together and for each other. We are in the fight for our lives. Public education is in the fight for our lives right now. And we also need to go on the offensive. We seem to always kind of be in defensive mode. We need to now go on the offensive, okay? And the money is out there. It's just a matter of them just prioritizing it correctly. Folks, I'd like to thank you for being a real courteous audience out there, and let's give it up one more time for our panelists right here.